A woman sits alone in a cafe, photographing her untouched latte. The foam art dissolves as she adjusts the angle for the 15th time, chasing light that fled minutes ago. You know this moment, the desperate hunt for something beautiful enough to share, meaningful enough to prove you exist. But watch closer. See how her fingers tremble. She's not documenting joy. She's manufacturing it, one filtered lie at a time. The cafe transforms. The walls stretch upward into an impossible cathedral of screens, each displaying a curated life more luminous than the last. Our woman rises, no longer flesh, but porcelain, her movements mechanical as she drifts between the glowing altars. In her hands, a golden mask, her face, but perfected, airbrushed, emptied of every flaw that makes her human. She approaches a mirror that reflects not her image, but her metrics. 847 likes, 23 comments, validation measured in heart and flames. The mask grows heavier with each notification, pressing against her skull until hairline fractures appear. Through these cracks, her real face peers out, exhausted, desperate, drowning in the very acceptance she thought she craved. The mirror shatters. Behind it stands another version of herself, this one aged and hollow-eyed, surrounded by towers of discarded masks, yesterday's faces, last year's personas, decades of performed perfection crumbling to dust. I collected moments, the older self whispers, but forgot to live them. I curated joy until joy became a word I could no longer remember how to feel. Schopenhauer understood this torment intimately, the will to life that drives us to seek recognition only to discover that external validation is a bottomless well. The more we drink, the thirstier we become. This is the paradox of digital existence, what psychologists call compare and despair syndrome, first identified in social media research by Dr. Tim Kasser. It describes the compulsive need to present an idealized version of ourselves, while simultaneously measuring our worth against others' performances. In our workplaces, we craft professional personas that mask our insecurities. On dating apps, we become products optimized for consumption. In our families, we perform the roles we think love requires, forgetting the person beneath the performance. Schopenhauer would call this a subtle trick of the will, the blind force that drives all existence to keep us perpetually dissatisfied and suffering. We chase the mirage of a perfect life while our actual life withers in the wings, unwitnessed and unlived. The ancients called it vanity. Today, psychology names it the false self syndrome. But here's the knife hidden behind the smile. Every perfect moment you capture kills a dozen imperfect ones you could have lived. What are you not experiencing while you're busy proving you exist? What conversations go unheard while you craft the perfect response? What sunsets fade unwitnessed while you edit yesterday's sky? The truth whispers, authenticity isn't an achievement, it's a surrender. She builds walls with compliments. You're too good for him, her friends say, laying another brick. You deserve better, adds her mother, sealing another gap where love might have entered. Watch how she nods, collecting these fragments of superiority like religious relics. She's constructing something magnificent, a fortress of standards so pristine that no mere mortal could ever scale them. The scene shifts. She stands in a tower of her own making, its walls built from crystallized expectations. Each brick bears an inscription. He must be taller. He must earn more. He must read Proust. He must understand my silence. The tower spirals upward into clouds, its peak lost in an atmosphere too thin for human breath. Below, figures move through the streets, men with kind eyes and gentle hands, poets with calloused fingers, teachers who laugh too loud, artists who dream in colors she's never seen. But from her crystal tower, they appear as shadows, insufficient beings walking through a world too small for her manufactured needs. She has become a curator of impossibility, an architect of her own exile. In her hands, a telescope that only magnifies flaws, never virtues. Through its lens, every potential love becomes a catalog of inadequacies. At the tower's base, a garden grows wild, untended, chaotic, alive. Here bloom the relationships she rejected, the imperfect love that would have challenged her, the messy intimacy that might have healed her, the ordinary magic she deemed unworthy of her exalted loneliness. A butterfly lands on the tower's foundation, delicate, ephemeral, beautiful in its fragility. She watches it through her window, this creature that chose to exist rather than to perfect itself. The tower trembles. In the garden below, she glimpses another version of herself, dirt under her nails, laugh lines around her eyes, holding hands with someone beautifully and perfectly human. I built this cage, her earthbound self calls upward. One standard at a time. I thought I was reaching for the stars, but I was only climbing away from life. As Schopenhauer observed, our desires often become our prisons. The very things we think will liberate us become the bars that confine us. This is what psychologists call perfectionism paralysis, or analysis paralysis in relationships. Coined by Dr. Brené Brown's research on vulnerability, it describes the tendency to set impossibly high standards as a defense against potential disappointment or rejection. In modern dating culture, we swipe left on possibility itself. In career choices, we wait for the perfect opportunity while life passes us by. In friendships, we maintain surface-level connections rather than risk the messiness of true intimacy. Schopenhauer would recognize this as the will's cruelest joke, convincing us that our suffering stems from not having enough when it actually comes from wanting too much. We build temples to our standards while life throws a party in the streets below. The myth called it Tantalus's curse. Today, psychology names it the perfectionist trap. But here's where the knife cuts deepest. Every standard you raise is a door you close. Every expectation you add is a possibility you murder. What love are you rejecting while you wait for perfection? What joy are you sacrificing on the altar of your impossible dreams? The garden whispers. Sometimes the most beautiful flowers grow in the cracks of broken expectations. He collects wisdom like vintage wine, quotes from dead philosophers, insights from living gurus, truths distilled from 10,000 books. His shelves groan with borrowed brilliance. His conversations sparkle with recycled revelation. But tonight, alone in his study, surrounded by his intellectual treasures, he faces the mirror and sees the most devastating thing imaginable. Nothing original looking back. The study transforms into a vast library that stretches beyond sight, its shelves rising into darkness. He wanders these corridors of accumulated knowledge, no longer a man, but a curator of other minds. His body has become translucent, filled with floating words and borrowed phrases that swirl like snow in a globe. When he opens his mouth to speak, only echoes emerge. Nietzsche's voice, then Jung's, then the latest podcast host, who changed his life. In the center of this infinite library stands an empty pedestal, spotlit and waiting. A small placard reads, "Original Thought." Around it, Scholars and seekers mill about, all transparent like him, all filled with the same swirling constellations of recycled ideas. They nod at each other knowingly, these ghosts of intellectual consumption, sharing profound quotes while their own voices fade to whispers. A child wanders into this temple of second-hand wisdom, solid and opaque, carrying nothing but curiosity. She approaches the empty pedestal and places upon it a simple question: why? The library trembles, books tumble from shelves, the borrowed words inside our protagonist's chest scatter like startled birds, leaving behind a hollow space that aches with possibility. In this emptiness, something stirs, not a quote or a concept, but a genuine wondering. His first original thought in decades emerges not as wisdom, but as admission. I don't know anything. I never did. I only knew how to repeat what others discovered in their own darkness. The child smiles. Around them, the library begins to transform. Some books dissolve, others open to blank pages waiting to be written. And he understands. Knowledge without experience is just sophisticated ignorance. This is what Carl Jung called intellectual inflation, the unconscious identification with accumulated knowledge rather than lived wisdom. First described in his work on the psychology of the unconscious, it manifests today in our culture of thought leaders and life hackers, where we mistake consuming information for developing insight. On social media, we share quotes instead of thoughts. In conversations, we perform intelligence rather than explore ideas. In our inner lives, we avoid the uncomfortable work of original thinking by surrounding ourselves with the safety of established wisdom. Schopenhauer would see this as the will's subtlest deception, convincing us that we can possess truth without paying the price of genuine inquiry. We build museums to other people's discoveries, while our own unexplored territories remain dark. The Greeks called it hubris. Today, psychology names it pseudo-intellectualism. Here's the sharp edge of this particular smile. Every quote you memorize is an experience you avoid having. Every insight you borrow is a revelation you prevent from emerging. What are you not discovering while you're busy collecting other people's discoveries? What truths remain unborn because you filled the space with borrowed light? The empty pedestal calls. The most profound wisdom is the courage to not know. She apologizes for existing. Sorry I'm late, though she arrived on time. Sorry to bother you when she needs help. Sorry for taking up space while shrinking herself into corners of rooms she helped to pay for. Each apology is a thread in an invisible net she weaves around herself, tighter with every unnecessary sorry, until she can barely breathe. The room transforms into a vast textile mill where she works at an ancient loom, weaving her own chains from threads of golden light. Each thread is an apology, a diminishment, a little death of self-worth. The other workers, all women, all translucent, tend similar looms, crafting their own beautiful prisons with practiced precision. Their fingers bleed starlight as they work, but they never pause, never question the pattern they're following. Above them hangs the master weaver's design, a tapestry that depicts women as shadows supporting the brightness of others, as negative space that gives shape to more important figures, as silence that makes other voices sound louder. She has been weaving this pattern so long she believes it's the only one possible. But in the corner of the mill sits an abandoned loom, its half-finished tapestry showing something different, a woman standing at full height, taking up space, speaking without apology. The threads are darker here, blues and purples and deep golds, colors she was taught were too much. A mouse emerges from behind this rebellious loom, carrying in its tiny mouth a single black thread marked with one word: no. She stares at this thread, so small, yet it seems to pulse with dangerous power. The other workers stop their weaving to watch, their translucent forms flickering between fear and fascination. What would happen if she took this thread? What would happen if she stopped apologizing for the space she occupies, the air she breathes, the light she reflects? The master weaver's design begins to unravel. Thread by thread, her carefully constructed prison of politeness comes undone, revealing beneath it a woman who has forgotten her own size, her own voice, her own right to exist without explanation. This phenomenon is what psychologists call chronic self-invalidation, or the imposter syndrome's quiet sister. First identified in feminist psychology by Dr. Carol Gilligan's research on women's moral development, it describes the learned behavior of minimizing one's presence and needs to avoid conflict or disapproval. In professional settings, women apologize for their ideas before sharing them. In relationships, they shrink their personalities to accommodate others' discomfort. In family dynamics, they become the emotional managers who apologize for everyone else's feelings. Schopenhauer, despite his complicated relationship with women, would recognize this as the will's most insidious manipulation, convincing half the population to voluntarily diminish themselves, creating suffering through systematic self-erasure. We internalize the message that our existence is an inconvenience, our voice an intrusion, our needs a burden. Mythology called it the curse of Cassandra. Today, psychology names it learned helplessness in feminine form. But here's the knife that cuts both ways. Every unnecessary apology is a boundary you fail to set. Every time you shrink yourself, you teach the world that you don't deserve the space you occupy. What would happen if you stopped apologizing for being human? What relationships would change if you claimed your full size? What dreams would become possible if you stopped weaving your own chains? The abandoned loom whispers, the most radical act is to exist without apology. She tends a garden where nothing grows. For years, she has planted seeds of hope in the same poisoned soil, watered them with tears, fertilized them with prayer, waiting for the miracle that never comes. Today, she finally understands. She is not a failed gardener. She is a master cultivator of beautiful suffering. The garden reveals its true nature, not earth and plants, but a landscape of crystallized pain so exquisite it takes your breath away. Each dead flower is a relationship she couldn't save, each withered tree a dream she couldn't abandon, each barren patch a part of herself she sacrificed to keep something else alive. She moves through this necropolis of her own making with the reverence of a curator in a sacred museum. Here grows the rose of first love, its petals now glass, its thorns sharp enough to draw blood from memory alone. There stands the tree of perfect motherhood, leafless but beautiful, its branches heavy with the weight of impossible expectations. Between them wanes a path of ground bone, her own ground-down desires, worn smooth by years of walking the same circles. At the garden's heart stands a fountain, filled not with water but with liquid starlight, her own tears transmuted by time into something precious. She has become the priestess of her own sorrow, finding in suffering a purity she could never locate in joy. The garden is dying, yes, but dying so beautifully that she cannot bear to let it live. A small green shoot pushes through a crack in the crystallized pane. She bends to pull it. This weed, this intrusion of possibility into her perfect despair. But as her fingers touch the tender growth, she sees what it truly is, not a weed, but a question made manifest. What if pain isn't sacred? What if it's just pain? The question spreads like wildfire through her crystal garden. The beautiful ruins begin to crack, not to crumble, but to make space. And in that space, something she had forgotten was possible. The ordinary miracle of things that grow not because they suffer, but because they can. Her reflection in the starlight fountain shows a woman who confused endurance with virtue, martyrdom with meaning, and she whispers to herself, "I thought holding on to pain made me holy. I never realized it just made me heavy." This is what trauma psychology calls trauma bonding with one's own suffering, a concept evolved from Stockholm Syndrome research by Dr. Patrick Carnes. It describes the unconscious attachment to our own pain patterns, the way suffering can become so familiar it feels like identity. In modern therapeutic contexts, we see people who sabotage recovery because health feels foreign. In relationships, we choose partners who confirm our deepest wounds rather than heal them. In spiritual seeking, we mistake prolonged suffering for enlightenment, confusing the cross for the resurrection. Schopenhauer would recognize this as the will's most sophisticated trap, convincing us that our suffering is meaningful, that our pain serves a purpose, that our wounds are somehow sacred. We become curators of our own misery, gardeners of dysfunction, priests in the church of what went wrong. The Romantics called it beautiful suffering. Today, psychology names it maladaptive coping through pain addiction. But here's where the smile conceals its sharpest blade. What if your pain isn't your purpose? What if your wounds aren't your worth? What if the garden of your suffering isn't a shrine, but simply soil, ready, finally, for something new to grow? What would you have to grieve if you let yourself heal? What identity would you have to shed if you stopped being the person to whom terrible things happened? The green shoot whispers its final secret. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is let yourself be ordinary happy.